got a short video about tarot right now because obviously it's like the mainstay of my existence. Tarot has been the thing which has kept me alive for more than 1.5 decades as far as like making a revenue and keeping myself alive is concerned. So for me, it is like really like important and useful. But one thing you'll never understand about tarot is everything. Alright, you will never understand everything about it because there's too many thoughts, feelings, moods, ideas, interpretations, and histories and revisionist histories which have gone on into tarot over the years. Quick reminder of the history of tarot the way that I have come to understand it. It was the Chinese who first came up with the idea of using something which would be portable and thin and could be used for playing games with, and they used their banknotes to do that, which eventually translated into cards, and therefore it was a gambling game. Alright, and every single game we play these days, which involves cards and tiles from dominoes, mahjong, and all the rest of that, poker, whist, 21, you name it, every single one would have come from that original root. And then there would have been like trade and conflicts and all the rest of that, which meant that this idea of using cards to play games with steadily moved from east to west. Okay? And this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 suit deck of cards. Now, there's examples out there of like Islamic tarot decks or something similar, which would have different imagery on the trump suit. And also there probably would have been pagan ones and all kinds of other things. It wasn't specifically owned by any particular denomination. It's just like this is one of the things that people do. It's just like the Christmas Midwinter Festival. Some people say, oh, it was pagan originally and diddly-diddly-dee. Now, come off it. It's the winter, it's dark, it's cold, it's depressing. You've got the coldest time of the year coming, namely about February and March. So essentially, why don't we just have a party now and cheer ourselves up? It's a human thing. It's not specifically owned by anyone. However, and it is a big however. Sorry, I've got this thing here just to show you that tarot was originally a game. Jeu de tarot, which is French for game of tarot. Because essentially it was a game. So if you've got yourself a nice, I don't know, Christian elderly relative who likes to go to church and also happens to play a bridge drive once in a while, you can tell them quite frankly, actually what you're doing is you're playing with tarot cards. And she'll probably let go a bit crazy on you. Because when the idea of this, a game which you can carry in your pocket and carry around, it must have seemed to them to be a bit like when the first portable electronic games came out, and that was so cool, you can carry it around and you can play with it and play with your friends, and isn't it wonderful? It must have been pretty awesome for the primitive people at the time. But the moment that this idea hit Europe, which was already Christianized thanks to whoever it was, I know Constantine or whatever, who turned like the Roman Empire into a Christian empire, and therefore Europe became very Christian and all the rest of that. Then we ended up with the kind of like similar designs to what we have today in what we call, tarot readers call the major arcana. In reality, it's not the major arcana, is it? Okay, it's a suit of trump cards, that's all. The suit of trump cards which have a role to play with point scoring when it comes to playing the game of tarot. But we gave it the name Major Arcana, meaning the big secret, because a mystical or religious interpretation started to be developed. Because these, the four main suits, ended up developing a bit of a meaning for regular humans in their day-to-day life. Conflict, social interaction and conviviality, which these days lots of people say, oh, it's to do with romance. Well, it might be, because romance is a form of social interaction, so maybe. Then commerce, and then what on earth are the sticks? What are the staves? They originally came from hockey sticks, therefore sport. So the four elements here are not the elements of earth, air, fire and water. They are the elements of conflict, social interaction, commerce, and sport. And therefore, these suits therefore refer to each and every single form of mundane activity. Alright? You go to work, therefore you're in a suit of coins. You get your paycheck, suit of coins. There's conflict in the workplace, suit of staves, a suit of swords, okay? You go for an after-works drink, social interaction, conviviality, team building, okay? Then it's Saturday afternoon, you watch the football, suit of sport. Do you see where I'm coming from here? So that's essentially much of human life. So it would make sense that the minor, what we call the minor arcana, should have much more imagery. So we've got to be really thankful to a certain extent to this guy, who's added lots more color and texture to the what we call the minor arcanas, in order to give them much greater emotional effect. If you've had a good look at the Crowley Thoth Tarot, you'll see that each and every single one of the minor arcanas, because of the use of color and shape and symbolism and structure and form, will give you a different emotion. And those emotions are subtly different. Okay? And therefore this one makes a brilliant contemplation meditation deck. It is in fact one of the best ones for that purpose. I personally still would not want to use the Night Sun for that purpose, because I think the Night Sun is much more spiritual, much more holy, much more divine, much more intense, and I love it too much. I just love it. If you haven't yet got the Night Sun in your collection, get it. Alright? But anyway, back to this. Now, the other thing that tarot cards have been used for, so legend has it, because we've got to accept the fact that within anything even vaguely mystical, or which has developed a mystical interpretation over the years, there will have been revisionist history. People will have made some stuff up, okay? But it is said that if, let's say, a messenger needs to go to, from one baron to another and pass on a message, but all of a sudden he gets a lousy throat infection and he can't talk anymore, he would get out some cards and try to explain it with a combination of sign language and the pictures from the cards. Oh, it's the queen of thingy-bob this and the king of that. So who is the knave? The knave is that guy over there. Who got it? Say a person who does. Look, just accept the fact that that card is representing someone who's being a bit of a pain in the arse in this one particular situation. Okay, all right. So it's a way of telling stories to carry information. Because of that, and the fact that some people would want to try and use this stuff for spiritual insight and the rest of that, it kind of like became a form of storytelling for people's lives. Alright? Especially when the church says, no, you're naughty. You're playing a gambling game. You're playing a gambling game with something which has developed church imagery. Because when the idea of tarot came into Europe, all of this stuff, the major arcana, developed Christian religious imagery. And I'm specifically showing you this one particular card here because you can see it. Alright? The four creatures in the book of Revelations, right? You got the circle talking about the Spirit. This is an image of the Holy Spirit at the end times from essentially the book of Revelations. The High Priestess, if I could find it quickly, and probably won't be able to because I haven't organized my deck properly, connects of course with the story of the book of Acts and the splitting of the temple, the splitting of the the veil between the priests and the people in the temple, because she's got a split veil over her face. If I could just find the image. I'm using this one particular deck by way of illustration because it's pretty close to, you know, traditional ancient image. I can't find it. It's got to be in there somewhere. No, I can't find it. Okay. Alright, well, either way. So, why specifically these images? Now, I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention this again for anyone who's new to this channel. In Rome, what they used to do is have an annual procession, basically saying, we are Romans, we are amazing, we just conquered these people, here's the spoils of war, we've got gold, we've got this, we've got weaponry, we got all this stuff because we are like military Mr. Number One. But when Rome became Christian, they then changed it, but they kept this thing called the Triumph Procession. And the imagery of all of the floats and the pageantry and the rest of that, it eventually became the images that we see essentially in what we now call the Major Arcana, the trump cards. So, from that we can logically and rationally extrapolate that the symbolism of the tarot is essentially Christian symbolism from the medieval mind. So if we were to think about, let's say, the meanings of any of these things, I mean, I was asked recently by some guy that I should talk about... Oh, well, hang on a second. Let's just go back to the Magician card for a minute. or the juggler, as it was probably called, la batelier or something in French. Okay, if he's often depicted as having the suits of the tarot on his table or about him. Okay, and some people, because these particular symbols entered into modern magic, entered into modern witchcraft, okay, as being like, ooh, they're the ritual tools and accessories. And therefore, ooh, the magician must be a magician because he's got the ritual tools and accessories on his table. Well, maybe he hasn't, okay? Maybe what it's talking about is he's got an understanding of conflict, sport, commerce, and social interaction. All right? That could have been what the card was trying to say in the old days. This particular one doesn't seem to have that on it because it's these authentic English fortune-telling tarot cards. Authentic English, bloody hell. It's only got the word English on it to make certain people think that this is like really, really important in English. But no, it isn't. So, you know, what do these things actually mean? Alright? It depends upon interpretation. Where does your interpretation come from? It comes from your understanding of how these symbols affect you, affect your mind, affect your perceptions, your thoughts, your feelings. There's the hermit that someone wants me to talk about. Okay? And so it has to be based upon what you've read, what you've thought, what other people have said to you, and so on and so forth. Okay? Each and every single depiction will be different. Alright? Each and every single picture will have some kind of message associated with it. But think closely for a moment. So see, getting really, really close to the hermit. There we go. What do you think? And I want you to really, really deploy your cognition, your your essentially English language comprehension type skills when looking at this. Taking into account that this imagery came from the medieval mind, what do you think this is referring to? Take all the time you want. Okay? The medieval mind. Alright? The medieval mind of Christianity. It could easily be talking about a wandering priest, maybe a Christ-like figure, maybe it's even an impression of someone carrying the Christ light with them. Or it could be a question of the lamp referring to wisdom or to understanding, because in those days they didn't have electric lighting. They would have to rely exclusively upon fire as the means of light, candles, oil lamps, you name it. Okay? And lights, therefore, would have been important and also quite rare and difficult to look after and also dangerous. So that must have added extra meaning to the whole thing as well. Or maybe it's referring to a monk, someone who has a certain level of power and authority. I mean, if you go to some of the old villages around England, you'll see that they have probably one stately home, okay, a farm or farmland that was owned by the stately home, where each and every single person in the village used to work, who was then controlled by the lord of the manor, who was controlled by the king, and the only other place they could go was either the church or the pub. Alright, that's basically all they really had, you know, church, alehouse, and also doing what the power said. So essentially you'd have state-run religion, you'd have state-run work, you'd have state-run land. You wouldn't be able to escape. Every single thing here is therefore somehow a reflection of how the state would have somehow influenced or controlled people's minds and lives. There was even some times in, I don't know, was it the reign of Henry VIII, when people would be punished really, 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 really hard, alright, for breaking the Lent fast. It was a tool of social control with violence and torture as a means of keeping people under control. So therefore, any form of portable iconography or extra ways of reinforcing that, or giving people a sense that no, this is actually quite good really, somehow, because it all comes from God and it's therefore good for you, would be how they would do things. This would have essentially been the closest thing they would have to media entertainment. Alright, basically the church and religious imagery. We have these days a diversity of different forms of art forms out there, and social myths that we learn from through TV, through movies and the rest of that. So not only do we have religious and magical tarot decks. I love these two, really love them, okay? But we've also got, there we go, a little bit of kinky porn. Story of Merlin, got Celtic imagery, we've got cute soft fluffy animals, we've got a bit of runes as well thrown in, druid Nico-pagan imagery, teenage gothic imagery and heavy metal imagery, and all these stuff, plus more and more. So therefore things have stopped becoming quite so clear cut. You could even blame possibly things like the Enlightenment movement, when that happened, as something which has created a diversity of opinions and art and expression, which helped to place much more, I suppose, power and authority in the hands of the individual, as well as in different forms of media creators, which has led to this prolifer, is that the right word? No, that's probably, well, rather a lot of different forms of expression. So what tarot is actually doing here is reflecting how humans have changed and how society has changed and how spirituality and faith has changed over the centuries to where we are now, with so much more weird stuff out there. But tarot is still, alive and well, but it's mainly from the reading point of view, from the spiritual point of view, and so on and so forth. So let's just go back to talking about what we see here, okay? You got the 4 elements of human life, and then this, your major arcana. That refers to your religious life, okay? In modern day occultism and spiritualism, the major arcana has taken on a life of its own. It's become a story about how a person grows spiritually in terms of their faith understanding. It's about how people grow in their faith understanding, and each and every single one of the cards has their own particular extra meaning to be added to the whole story of something. Okay? So that's why this is regarded as the major arcana, the major mystery being the mystery of faith, the mystery of religion, the mystery of the Bible, of the Quran, of the whatever it is, okay? The mystery of the Gautama Buddha and Shiva and Hare Krishna and all that kind of stuff. The mystery of the higher conscience, the mystery of why we're here and what the world is really about, which we'll never properly understand because we're humans and we tend to stop at a certain level of development. So we try our hardest not to progress beyond that because it's scary for us, because it affects our sense of identity and so on and so forth, right? Okay. Now, what do the numbers mean? That's also rather grey. I mean, tarot itself is in fact a little bit grey. It's a little bit woolly. It's a little bit, we don't really know. I mean, there's people these days of like, the power of numbers has changed. There's now like angel numbers and numbers of this, that and the other, and of course your standard basic numerology still has its importance within spiritual circles, but it doesn't seem to be quite as clear cut as maybe it used to be. So, you have to research different understandings of different forms of numbers and see how that works for you as a symbol system for your self-analysis, for your analysis of the world around you. Okay? It becomes very broad. But if you were to refer back to this guy, if you haven't been brave enough to pick up this one particular deck, Aleister Crowley Thoth Tarot, that gives you intuitively, from the artwork, much more of a feeling as to what the various different cards would mean. So you can practice with that and try and memorize the imagery for the various different cards. And then when you end up with something with much more boring artwork on it, like this, you can then think, well, that reminds me of the one I saw in the Crowley deck, and that said this, that, and the other, because the art spoke to me in this, that, and the other way. Therefore, this is what it could be meaning. Okay? That's essentially a good way of doing things. You can start with that for your training. Self-learning of the symbolism. You won't, none of this stuff will give you the power to sort of like understand, the past, present, and future, and all this rest of that kind of stuff. but that comes from, to a certain extent, all right, your spiritual development with things like meditation, prayer, and opening the chakras when you're doing your meditation and prayer. I do get the feeling, though, however, as so many of the words in the Lesser Key of Solomon are written in the style of Christian prayer, that, you know, there was probably monks in the old days who were doing spiritual exercises without telling people, and possibly like, maybe they should like be leaving the church and carry on pursuing this particular weird thing that they've just suddenly discovered. You know, it's beautiful, because that's how we ended up with the way the world is. Alright? That's the way we ended up with the way the world is, through people experimenting, exploring, and trying to work things out for themselves. And it's a good thing that we've got things like the Wiccan religion and all the rest of that, because there is a space psychologically for people to be able to do that without feeling that they're doing something wrong, because they're not. Alright? They're just like not. And anyone who says they are, they just got problems, and there's no point in listening to them. So chill out, relax. But it's the attitude that one needs to take to this, I think, which is something we also need to discuss. I wouldn't take what comes out in a reading as gospel. Okay, it should be a tool or creative tool which can help you to think more about your life. And you need to be able to intellectually and emotionally separate yourself from what comes out in your own readings, and also what comes out in any readings you buy from other people. Because there's so many people who say, well, the psychic said this, therefore it must be true. No, we can actually be wrong once in a while. All right, it is known. It is known that we can be wrong. See what's said to you as being a guiding point of view, and then creatively, like, look at what's actually around you, the actual evidence of it. All right, it's just like, if you come across someone who's paranoid that everyone's trying to get at them, okay, and then you say, stop for a minute. When's the last time that actually happened? Okay, when you walked down to the shops, did it happen? Okay, when you walked down to the high street, did it happen? No. Because the reality around you is different from what's inside your head and what you fondly believe. Alright, in one of the things that Aleister Crowley said, he said, you find your true will, alright, and stop imagining yourself to be what you thought you once were. But part of being human is to perpetually learn more about what's real.